Hello, how's everybody doing?
Hey, hey, what's up?
Oh, not much. Let's see. There's Sophie. All right, I'm gonna start bringing in some clients.
Oh, that's wow.
Got quite a few people popping in. I'm gonna give it just a minute before we get started. How's everybody doing today?
Well, slightly overwhelmed, but okay.
Oh, thanks.
I understand that. I live in a state of overwhelm.
I just joined this group yesterday, so you can imagine.
Well, it's nice to have you.
Well, thank you. It's nice to be here, starting my fitness journey at 65.
It's never too late.
I've been active. I just have issues. So yeah.
Where are you from, Lisa?
I don't know. I don't see. Hey, where are you from?
Where are you calling in from, Lisa?
Grosse Pointe, Michigan, Grosse Pointe Farms, right outside of Detroit.
All
Where
right.
are you located? Anybody from Michigan here?
I
No.
don't think any of our coaching group is. I live in Arkansas.
Okay. I know Lisa's in Jersey.
New York, but
Oh, you're in New
yeah,
York. Okay,
yeah.
someone told me the other Lisa said New Jersey.
Oh,
So
okay.
you obviously know LBI.
Oh yeah. Oh my gosh. I've
I'm heading, we have a house there. I'm heading there Thursday, myself and Hurricane Aaron.
oh nice. Okay. Yeah. Oh wow. It's been over 20 years since I've been to LBI, but what a fun area though.
It is, well, my son, his wife, three kids, and two dogs are there. I'm going in to do cleanup.
Oh, okay, that's
Play
fun.
with play with the kids, and the dogs. The dogs will be the most happy to see me.
Yeah. Oh gosh.
Well, it's great to have everybody. I'd love to know where everybody's calling in from. Feel free to pop it into the chat. See some new names as well as some familiar names. And I'm going to give it just a minute because I still have a couple people rolling in. All right, let's see. Got Minnesota from India. Well, it's nice to have people from all over the world. Got Pennsylvania, Prattsville, Arkansas. Hey, Angela, hope you're doing good. You're right down the road. British Columbia, Mexico City. Wow. All right. I think that is probably everybody. We are at 12:05 Central, so we'll get started. And if we have, oh, Ireland, Austin, Texas. I miss Austin. All right. So today we're going to cover um ovarian function. So there's quite a few pieces that go into the maturation of follicles and hormones, and I had made some slides, and I really wanted to kind of talk through application. So obviously we focus on health and nutrition and sleep management and stress reduction. But I really like the mechanics of things, so I'm going to kind of talk through some of the functions of the HPO axis. So what is that? It's basically brain to ovarian axis, and it has application for all of you. So depending on what stage of life you're in, looking at signal hormones from start to finish in the body. So I wanted to start with pictures. Everybody knows I love pictures, so we'll start with this. I got this from ResearchGate. So you well, not everybody. If you're new to the program, you may have not done diagnostics with us, but for those who are in the program, we do a pretty in-depth set of lab work to understand hormonal statuses in the body. I think a lot of times people don't fully understand what's on the paper when we get the blood work in. So just kind of giving you start to finish of hormone production in your body. So really everything starts in the brain, which is very interesting. So you have a control center in the brain called the hypothalamus. Say a small stalk that sits in the brain. The hypothalamus will signal something called the pituitary gland through an action called GnRH, and that's your gonadotropin hormones. So when we're looking at hormone production, everything starts in the brain. You will then, from hypothalamus to pituitary glands, you'll send these negative feedback loops to the ovaries. So ovaries are going to be the area in the body where things like estrogen, progesterone, testosterone are made. And kind of understanding this process is very helpful. So, things that I think about when we look at ovarian function. So, you have follicle growth that helps with the production of estrogen. That's done through something called FSH, which you'll see right here. And then that is going to stimulate the granulosa cells to make things like estrogen. You also have luteinizing hormone. These are things you'll see on your blood work. LH is going to trigger ovulation and production of androgens through this theca cell. So, why does that matter? When we look at blood tests, a lot of times we may see low testosterone, low progesterone. For women in menopause, more times than not, low estradiol. So, getting an understanding of how your body works really empowers you to understand your blood work. So, a lot of times, what we see is imbalances or dysfunction in this chain of action. So, I really like to look at some of the baseline features. So, believe it or not, your ovaries make a lot of male hormones like testosterone, and you have something from the theca cells to LH to produce things like testosterone. And then you have other cells that convert those androgens into estrogen. So, a lot of your estrogen you see on paper or that you're creating in your body is actually due to a amount of testosterone being produced. A lot of times we can see changes in LH and FSH as you go through menopause. This signal increases. So your ovaries basically send a negative feedback loop up to the brain saying, hey, there's not enough estrogen. So that frequency picks up pretty substantially. And that's how primary care, OBGYN, functional medicine doctors get a idea of what type of hormonal status you're in. And the interesting piece with that is we see a lot of metabolic dysfunction. Things like insulin resistance is something that will change the frequency of these hormones. So when we have things like metabolic disturbances, your body tends to produce a lot more of this luteinizing hormone, which can throw off the testosterone to estrogen ratio, estrogen to progesterone ratio. So we do a full workup. I think a lot of times people think that hormonal disturbances act alone, but what I've realized over time working with both men and women is nothing really happens in isolation. Everything's interconnected. So when we look at ovulatory defects in the body, things like high amounts of LH surge will cause issues with ovulation defects. A lot of times, I would say the majority of the women coming through the program have low levels of progesterone. Other things that can impact the progesterone production in the body is going to be stress. And the interesting piece with that is when cortisol is elevated for a prolonged period of time, it will actually change a lot of the things further upstream. So, stress response in the body will cause you to produce less hormones. So, I think one of the biggest pieces I see is hormonal disruptions, stress, metabolic disturbances. Those are things that are going to change things downstream. Um, if you are currently menstruating and you have issues somewhere in this axis, a lot of times progesterone will be low. What does that impact? It will not allow corpus luteum to form. So basically, uh, your body will build a sheath, hoping that an egg is going to be implanted. That does not happen, you break down that sheath and bleed it, basically bleed. So a lot of times where we can see issues with abnormal menstrual cycles is going to be um, due to that. So, things that you could experience with that could be loss of cycle, that could be heavy cycles. PMS are also going to be included in that. Other root causes of dysfunction, thyroid issues, I think are a big piece that people don't really look at. So, thyroid hormone, when very low, can slow ovulation, can also lower progesterone, and then gut inflammation. So, when you make all of these hormones, your body has to be able to excrete them. So, being able to look at further testing of your GI function will give us an idea of how well your body is clearing things like estrogen, as well as other things like environmental toxins. So, some of the interesting stats, because I think it's important to look at, is when we look at infertility, 25% of all infertility cases, there's a luteal phase defect. So, I think having an understanding of this process makes things a little bit more clear. I don't know if anybody's had a provider or a coach or some functional medicine doctor kind of explain this process, but I think that understanding this will give you a clear-cut picture on some of the things that are going on in your body. So I hope that's not too dry for everybody, but I think it's very interesting. So we can look at some of the dysfunctions here. So you can see like thyroid dysfunction, prolactinoma, Cushing's disease, all of these things are going to impact how well your body is able to produce hormones. So I think this is pretty interesting. What I would say is the majority of the clients coming in have some dysfunction somewhere in this process of things. So I wanted to pause there because that is a lot of information. Does anybody have any specific questions on any of those processes? And then maybe we can get into some ways to manage stress, digestion, insulin resistance. But I wanted to pause for clients and see if we can answer anything as a collective. We have the full coaching group here.
Hey guys, this is Emily Taylor. I had a question on that, Justin.
Mhm.
Is there, I mean, I've done a lot of research and reading up on a lot of these things, but I'm wondering the thing that I never seem to be able to find a clear-cut answer to, so I'm guessing there's a reason for that, is that there doesn't seem to be a way to specifically pinpoint what part of that axis or process the dysfunction is happening in, other than looking at the function of the thyroid or looking at the function of where your hormones are at and that kind of thing. Have you found that there is a faster way to pinpoint where things are going wrong?
Yeah, I think that's a good question. Emily, things that I would say to start with is like a full endocrine evaluation, if you've had one of those, looking at if you are having a normal menstrual cycle, kind of getting an idea of where hormone status is somewhere in your luteal phase. Why do we do that? Is we want to see if we have that surge of progesterone. That's going to give us an idea if you're having a healthy ovulation. So that would show us both on that lab test, LH, FSH, appropriate ratio, where your progesterone is. LabCorp gives a pretty large range for luteal phase progesterone. It's like 1 to 23. Working with several doctors over the years, the kind of the consensus that I've heard is um, somewhere around north of 10 of a progesterone shows healthy ovulation. Now, if that's low, then we probably want to look at other areas, and that would be where we take in thyroid to account. We test that, so we'd be able to look at free forms of thyroid, T3 uptake, reverse T3, thyroglobulin, TPO antibodies. Those are going to play a role. Have you had anything like that done before, or talk to me a little bit about what you've done to kind of resolve your current issues.
Um, I, well, I did the Dutch test and um, I've had, I think day 21, day 3 blood tests at the OB and just kind of like tracked my cycle or tried to, I mean, I've tried different kinds of diets or whatever, but, and I don't know if context matters, but my husband and I have not been able to conceive for those of you that are wondering why I'm asking these questions, but, um, and so there's not really no one seems to be able to, other than like the low hormones that you pointed out on the Dutch test, no one seems to really be able to identify why things aren't happening because the doctor would be like, oh, yes, you ovulated, but then, like maybe there are other symptoms that didn't seem to line up with that, or my FSH was really high, or I don't know. It just seemed like between the, I guess, Western medicine, so to speak, it was a little hard to see where the disconnect was happening, which is part of why I started learning, researching. I mean, I've looked into and tried homeopathy. I started investing in a functional doctor for a little while. That's when I had the Dutch test. Had to put that on pause. So I don't really have a lot of investment. The doctor that the OB the GYN that I was going to basically said, go see an endocrinologist. And I I knew I already know that all they're gonna say is do IVF, and we didn't want to do that. And I don't really want to do that still. I think that there are other sides of that and just my personal convictions with some of those things. So um I hope that kind of gives you a picture to fill in some of the blanks, maybe.
Yeah, no, it does. I would think that some of the things I would think about are making sure if we're starting at the top, I think a lot of times when you go see a fertility specialist or even endocrinologist, they're going to have this like doctrine of what's acceptable as far as ranges. And
Mhm.
we all know that ranges are very vast. So just because you fit within that context of quote unquote normal, doesn't mean that that is optimal for your body, especially if you're trying to conceive. So I'll give you some personal information. Me and my wife, we had our daughter's 7 months old tomorrow, and her thyroid was a big piece of that. So um, working through different things. So I was taking some things to help with increasing sperm count, motility, was doing a lot on my end. We actually did some further evaluation on her thyroid, very low levels of T3, somewhat abnormal TSH. It wasn't crazy, it wasn't over the range. But for us to be able to dial her thyroid in, we were able to conceive. So that can be a piece of it. Thyroid's a big piece that a lot of people don't consider when looking at um, fertility. So I would say making sure that piece is fully investigated, you need a thorough workup. The TSH is not going to be enough for you to make an assessment on what's going on from a thyroid standpoint. I think the other thing that people don't really look at is when we look at the maturation of follicles and hormones, you need enough minerals. So I think some of the things that I spoke to you about was like an HMA, just making sure you have adequate amounts of zinc, you have adequate amounts of selenium, you have adequate amounts of I'm drawing a blank because I'm very tired today, but just basically having all of your minerals in place, and then you're also not overloaded by any toxic elements as well. So that's kind of like baseline. I would want to make sure that someone is covered from a nutrient standpoint, and there's no
Yeah.
external environmental toxins causing any issues. So I would start there and kind of work up. I would look at thyroid, and then I would go into more endocrine evaluation, looking at that if your FSH is high, why is that happening? Are you having issues with low levels of estradiol? Because if you are trying to mature a follicle, you're going to need adequate amounts of estrogen. And if your FSH is elevated, you may be on you may have lower amounts of that certain times of the month. So appropriate medications may come in at that point. I don't know if anybody's talked to you about like I think traditionally they do Clomids pretty regular.
Yeah, I did try that. It didn't work, so the doctor was like, "Nah, forget that. Just go see an endocrinologist." So, and I don't know. I didn't really feel like I should do that. I know that sounds kind of flaky, but sometimes you just have a sense like something isn't good for you, I think. So,
Yeah,
um,
I
that's
think
where I was at on that.
I would look at some of the root cause stuff. So minerals, I'd look at stress balance. I think cortisol is also going to play a role. So if you have a really low
Yeah.
CAR, your body only cares about surviving. It doesn't care about making hormones. So being able to make sure that stress response is normal, because if we have an abnormal stress response, a lot of your hormones are going to go down similar pathways, and you're going to favor making things like neurosteroids, DHEA, pregnenolone into cortisol. So if there's disruption there, that's another area, especially if you don't want to do medications like Clomid, you want to look at those other areas and see potentially what else is going on.
Okay.
I think
Well, thank
GI,
you.
yeah, absolutely. Um, I think all of those pieces would help paint a better picture for you, so you have a more clear-cut direction to what to do
Right.
versus bouncing between doctors' offices, because I know that can be frustrating.
Yeah. Well, and it just seems like lately, more recently, just the kind of the culture of medical field is like, what's good for you? Well, I'm coming to you because you're the doctor. That's what I'm here for. So I don't like that, um, but that helps you figure out where you need to go to. So that's okay.
Yeah. Yeah, I would say, testing is probably going to be the best idea, and making sure you're in that right environment. Sometimes I see people going to do testing and they're nowhere near a luteal phase, and they're testing hormones, and estrogen's low, progesterone's low, and they should be at certain times of the month. So you want to make sure that you're in a right environment to test those things.
Okay.
Did
We'll
I answer
process.
your question?
Yeah, I mean, I think ultimately there's a lot that goes into being able to find a specific reason where like you said, the dysfunction in that axis or something is happening. So that depends on the person and I get that. So it is helpful. I'm hoping that some of the testing with you guys can maybe lend some answers to that as well. And I do appreciate your breakdown of these things because it's hard to find a thorough explanation in places.
Yeah, it's a super complex system. So I think
It
kind of
is. Yeah,
understanding some of the baselines is definitely helpful.
sure. Well, thanks.
Yes, absolutely. Fatima, is an endocrine evaluation included in the blood work? So yes, everybody will get a lab review on any blood work that you do, and we'll basically If you've had blood work done, there's a lot of vials of blood. I always joke and say it's a process of elimination. We don't really know what's going on until we get all that blood work in, and then we basically go line by line and cross off all of the things that potentially are not wrong, and then we hone in and focus on the things that are abnormal. We do that from a blood work standpoint, and then from a GI standpoint as well. Ashley would cover that with clients, and we're able to give lifestyle supplementation. Those who are in the US will also have the ability to prescribe bioidentical hormones, peptides, all of those things. All right, I have another question here. Is there any additional health management for surgical menopause? That's a good question. I think that with a hysterectomy, um, partial or full hysterectomy, that access that I was showing, there's going to be dysfunction in that as soon as you remove reproductive organs. That's going to cause a yes. Yeah, I would say one ovary, two ovaries, whatever's being removed, that feedback loop is going to be disrupted. Usually, what most prescribers will do in allopathic or functional medicine is replacing hormones. Um, I think last week or the week before, we kind of talked about hormones and their protective benefits to the body. So, including bone, brain, cardiovascular system. So, in my opinion, I know everybody's going to have different thoughts on that, but you're going to want to probably replace hormone. And I always say that there is an art of balancing and taking hormones. It's not going to your OBGYN once a year and they're kind of checking the box that everything's okay. You want to, uh, if you're going to implement hormones, you want to retest with that, look at labs, look at symptoms associated with those labs, and then be able to make adjustments because it's, again, not just taking the hormones. You want to think about how your body is metabolizing and detoxing those hormones, as well as all the other processes in the body. Things like inflammation, insulin resistance, that's going to change those end fates of those drugs that you're using. So you want to make sure that you are in a healthy metabolic standpoint to handle those hormones. Um, those are usually our recommendations. Looking at labs would give you more clear-cut idea on what type of therapy makes sense for you. So I hope that answered your question. If not, okay, good. Um, yeah, do we have any other questions on this piece of it? And then I was going to get into potentially things to help regulate hormonal axes.
Justin, I have a question, but I think it's segueing into your next topic.
Go for it.
When you were talking about metabolizing hormones. So if you're not going to be getting a Dutch complete done to see like the pathway of the metabolites of like estrogen and testosterone, and someone's just doing blood labs, how much gray area is there, despite if hormones look normal for them to be an estrogen dominance? Um, how much gray area is there compared to a Dutch complete? And so how much or low or high or any of the above?
That's
That's kind of my question.
a great question. Yeah, I think that um, when we look at like traditional blood work, it's going to be really good to cover things like thyroid, metabolic status. So metabolic status, glucose, insulin, general inflammatory markers, thyroid function, but it does not show the breakdown of estrogens. So on a Dutch complete, you're going to be able to see phase one estrogen metabolism, basically how your liver is handling and dismantling those estrogens into phase two estrogen metabolism. So just because FSH is suppressed and you have enough estradiol and it's not way out of range, doesn't mean someone is not symptomatic or having estrogen dominant like symptoms. So I think something like a Dutch test really shines there for someone taking bioidentical hormones and or for the cycling female who is having symptoms associated of estrogen dominance around their cycle. I would say that is, in my opinion, gold standard. I know a lot of people don't like the Dutch test because it's dried urine, but it's a very sophisticated test. It's a LCMS testing. So basically, it's a very sophisticated where it's going to pull exact metabolites of estradiol, estrone, and estriol. So, in my opinion, I think that it is the best test to look at hormone metabolism. It's also going to show the breakdown of progesterone, and it breaks down into some other metabolites, alpha and beta pregnadiol. If you're replacing progesterone and a doctor is telling you they want to give it to you to help you sleep, looking at that metabolism is going to be very impactful to see if that's true for you. If you're favoring an alpha breakdown of that progesterone, it will have more GABAergic benefits versus if you're going down the other pathway. It may be there to help protect reproductive organs, but it may not have that same benefit from GABA and sleep and calming. So super helpful. Also, last piece is cortisol. When we look at cortisol in blood, it's all tied to albumin and globulin, and it's going to give you a total, but it's not going to explain the free cortisol pattern, the cortisone pattern, as well as your cortisol clearance rate, which all happens at the liver. So I think that information is very insightful because again, nothing happens in isolation. So if I see thyroid dysfunction on blood serum test, I probably want to look at cortisol. I want to look at liver, and then that's going to give you a better understanding of reduction and clearance of all those hormones. That answer your question?
Yeah, yeah, it does. I was just kind of thinking today, like how many women get Dutch completes and then get BHRT versus women just doing standard blood tabs or blood labs, not tabs. And it could be not even with us, just anywhere at any point of their life, and then just educating so you can really say, oh, okay, so is a blood test enough if you're not considering symptoms, or if we're putting blood tests above symptoms, or if you really, really do need to just do a Dutch complete if you're going to be doing BHRT for the long term, just to make sure you can understand what's happening at the liver and the gut. Well, it doesn't show anything about the gut necessarily. Well, it does, but you know what I'm saying, like indirectly, even a GI map and seeing what's happening there to make sure you're not overdoing it or underdoing it with BHRT versus just isolated blood tests. Does that make sense? Am I making sense?
Makes a lot
All the
of
things that yeah.
Yeah, I think the only issue with the Dutch complete is if you don't have any hormones, you can't see clearance of hormones. So your phase two metabolism may look really good because there's no hormones circulating in the body. So if someone's in menopause, usually starting with blood serum, and then as you replace hormones, looking at more of a Dutch complete, in my opinion, makes more sense. Estrogens can be very protective and beneficial if you metabolize it correctly. If you don't, it can also cause a lot of issues. So, I think having all of that data is extremely helpful. And then from there, looking at clearance through the GI tract. So I wanted to pass the microphone to Ashley and have her kind of talk through some of those processes. Say we have things working well from phase one and phase two, estrogen metabolism, and potentially how the GI map can play into that detoxification and how important it is. Because in my opinion, I think GI map is extremely important.
So you mean how what plays into the detoxification? How the GI map does?
Yep, and potentially if things are abnormal with the GI map, how those could cause issues, even if blood serum looks okay and Dutch test looks okay, if things are abnormal in a GI map, how that could potentially play into symptoms.
Yeah, well, I mean, some of that you may have to speak to too, because I feel like a lot of the hormone pieces good for you, but yeah, it's really interesting because I've talked about this a lot, but there's so much that stems from the gut in terms of how the gut bacteria influences different metabolisms in general. So, like estrogen detox, the phases of that is obviously, it's metabolized in the liver, but then it's excreted in the stool. So when our bacteria influences like that motility, right? And how well we excrete things. And so like one of the biggest things is the beta glucuronidase that we show. And so when the beta glucuronidase can show us how well we are detoxifying our hormones and toxins. And so that can basically, and also related to our gut bacteria. So certain bacteria, if they are overgrown, can then influence and that beta glucuronidase and raise that, which then can hold on to some of those hormones and recirculate through. So it gets reabsorbed, which can lead to, let's say, estrogen dominance, which can lead to a lot of those symptoms. So the PMS and heavy bleeding, fibroids and breast tenderness and stuff like that. Also the overgrowth in general, if we have overgrowth patterns, can just increase inflammation. And so the inflammation disrupts, the inflammation in itself disrupts those like liver and detox pathways. Certain things like candida can influence just that permeability and the inflammation, which can then in turn worsen that hormone balance that way. Other things too, certain bacterias are protective. And so like if you don't have as much of that, so some of our commensal bacteria, some of our healthy bacteria that we want, like lactobacillus or bifidobacterium, when we don't have as much, then we don't have as much of the binding and elimination of the estrogen. And so that, and then dysbiosis in general can influence that, the bile and our bile metabolism. And so when those are imbalanced, then the excretion altogether. So like there's so much of that motility that is influenced by different bacteria and overgrowths. Both the healthy bacteria and the unhealthy bacteria both can play a role in that, and just like the bile flow and motility of things and inflammation. And another thing, like leaky gut is another piece of that, just with endotoxins and inflammation that are stressing the liver, that just reduce that hormone clearance. Does that cover a lot of what you were saying?
Yeah, that's great. So on the topic of gut, Kelsey just dropped something in here. I've been getting so many ads on social media about acromantia. Can you explain the role of it in the gut, as well as specifics of acromantia in connection to menopause? Sounds like this is extra needed in menopause from the mass amounts of ads I've seen, or is it a little bit more hype than it should be? Is it worth getting an Akkermansia specific probiotic strain if it's low in the GI map?
Well, first off, I always say there's always hype. If you're seeing a lot of things like, I don't know. I am definitely, when it comes to health things, a skeptic by nature. I will laugh and say it's like when, Sweet and Low came out and it's like the next best thing. And then they're like, oh, by the way, acid might cause cancer. So, I'm always weary of new trends, especially when they take off quickly I go more in like the research mode, like what are the long-term research of these sort of things and all of that. Akkermansia, it's in the mucosal layer in the gut. It's in that mucin. And so, I'll talk a lot about that. Mucosal layer is really important for the gut barrier. It's a protective barrier. And so there's a lot of pieces of that. So like your commensal bacteria basically feed on mucin, and so they help make that mucosal layer thick and healthy. And so Akkermansia specifically, it feeds on mucin, and it's a protective of the lining. It stimulates more mucin production, and it helps with that gut barrier. So it's really good for the gut barrier. That helps with inflammation, that helps with T cells, and it helps with insulin sensitivity and lipid metabolism. So there's so much for a gut barrier in general. Part of that too is like short chain fatty acids, because it promotes acetate and other production that help fuel those beneficial bacteria. So, there's some of those things. Is some research that akkermansia can potentially play a protective role when it comes to hormone balance. I don't know the long-term research on this, but I do know that um, estrogen's important for gut barrier function. And so, like, as estrogen declines, more likely to have more inflammation and more gut permeability. So in theory, akkermansia is helping by strengthening that mucosal layer, helpful in that regard. Um, there are studies about akkermansia, being helpful with like blood glucose control and lipid profiles and stuff like that. So I think a lot of it, at least from my perspective, and if anybody else has more knowledge, it's great. I think a lot of it is just there's so much balance and protection that comes from the gut, but I would never lean into just one thing. Our bodies are so complex. And so, like, sure, akkermansia is important, but so is bifidobacterium. So is, like, keeping parasites at bay and whatever. I mean, there's so many pieces to it that I don't think you can ever lean into one thing. And I'm a big believer in like the big picture of things. And I know Justin spoke to this earlier, like really looking at a lot of different angles in terms of, and stress is such a huge role in your gut barrier, right? And so potentially, you're getting plenty of akkermansia, but your stress is, causing such permeability and, influence that gut barrier. So I just think there's more to it than that. When I look at commensals specifically in the GI map, I do think it's fascinating how different, so your healthy bacteria, sorry, commensals, your healthy bacteria. I think it's fascinating how different ones have different roles, but they all have different roles and they're all important. So making sure that we are getting enough, healthy bacteria and commensals. And a lot of that is influenced by lifestyle and diet. Yes, we can, and I mean, I'm a believer in supplementation, but you can control so much through, I'll just say, stress relief and high fiber. Have such a huge role in those commensals and in that akkermansia. I also think we could go down a whole path of like when you take bacteria, it's not a direct correlation of necessarily like taking the akkermansia and then your akkermansia goes up because so much can be destroyed along the way. That doesn't mean it doesn't impact your bacteria, but it's more complex than that. And so you have to think about what you have control over and how much benefit it has. So like I said, really leaning into diet and lifestyle largely. And then also looking at the GI map, I think can be fascinating. We can see where that lies and really see more of the big picture because that akkermansia may not be it by itself, right? Like there may be so much more going on that's influencing those healthy bacteria than just not having that healthy bacteria. Hopefully I didn't talk too crazy there.
No, that's super awesome. So the thing is, and I'm curious on this, and I think I may be right, but I want to ask you is like, so if you say you just take lactobacillus or you just take akkermansia and you don't consume any fiber, I mean, fiber is what feeds those commensal bacteria, right? So you're really like chicken before the egg if you're not having enough fiber in your diet to beef up all those commensals.
100%. Yeah. And that's why I'm saying, um, there is benefit to taking probiotics. There's benefit, but really a lot of them don't survive by themselves. They can still influence, there are certain, and it also depends on what they are and whether they're spore based and what the delivery system is and, whether they're coated or not, whether you're taking them with food or not with food. I mean, there's so much to that. But the things that we know will make it through are fiber, like prebiotics and probiotics are, I mean, in terms of food, right? Like the way you eat your food. But there's a lot of indirect benefits to taking probiotics. So they can still produce like antimicrobial peptides that help discourage pathogens. They can produce metabolites that influence healthy bacteria like lactate and short chain fatty acids. They can influence the mucosal immunity with your Tregs and stuff like that. So like there's still a lot of ways that it helps and influences those healthy bacteria without it just being like I took akkermansia and then my akkermansia is higher. And so that's what I'm saying, like there's still benefit to that, and actually there's still benefit to which ones you take through what you have going on, like whether you're sick or on antibiotics or whether you have SIBO. And so there are specific ones that are helpful in different ways, but the overarching, absolutely, if we can, I'm repeating myself, but work on stress and eat more fiber, I think we're above most of the world.
And then last question I would have, because I actually had issues with this. You did my GI map a couple of years ago, and a lot of people don't consume enough fiber, and fiber may be hard on somebody's digestive tract when they're new to it. So say somebody eats a very refined carbohydrate or a keto or a carnivore diet. What are your recommendations maybe to slowly start increasing that fiber? And is there specific things you see that are easier on the digestive tract?
Yeah, that's a good question. So that is one thing that, a lot, and again, GI map specific. This is why I love GI maps, because we can see a lot of, let's say somebody's not tolerating fiber, of why they might not be tolerating fiber. So it might be there are certain things that we're going to treat on the map that are going to help that a lot. And so, like I said, it's nice to look at certain specific things. But that said, if somebody, again, logging food can be helpful, by seeing how much fiber you are eating. So let's just say you're like, oh, I don't tolerate fiber very well. Well, okay, let's log and see how much you are tolerating. So let's see what that looks like. And so if you're having 10 grams a day, I would never, often I'm encouraging people to have 25 to 30 grams a day. If you're having 10, you jumping to 30, I tell everybody, I'm like, you're going to be like, Ashley, I can't eat vegetables. And so, and obviously I don't want that to be the case. So one thing that I recommend is just doing it slowly and be specific about it. So if you're getting an average of 10 grams a day or less or whatever, then let's start with 15 or 12, and start with 15 and do it for a week or two. Now, again, this is why it's really helpful to have a GI map, because if you have other things going on, there may be things that are influencing your ability to digest that fiber that we need to be treating. So just in short, increasing slowly, it's kind of like water. Like if you're drinking 10 ounces of water a day, you jumping to 90 is going to be miserable. And so doing that slowly and working, your gut will start to, assuming you don't have a lot of things going on, will start to do that. But that said, there are certain fibers that are easier to digest and break down. So soluble fermented fibers are easier. So I'm sure, like the over-the-counter fiber, like psyllium husk, in general, or things that are made with that, and like acacia fiber and like oats and barley, pectins. So like apples and citrus things, inulin, chicory root, asparagus. Those are easier to dissolve and digest. Insoluble fiber is more bulking. So you're thinking like wheat bran and skins and seeds and stuff like that is still good for you, but it does other things and it adds more bulk, and it but it doesn't dissolve well, so it's not very well digested. Then you also have like resistant starches, so like your like green bananas, and rices and legumes and stuff like that. They're a little fermented. They feed on that healthy bacteria, but those can also cause gas in some people. And so anyway, so looking at some of those like more tolerated fibers, as you're increasing, and then just doing it really slowly. And also paying attention. I mean, again, our bodies are complex. So like there may be things that you don't tolerate that's just like a sensitivity to that thing. You also have the like broccolis and cauliflowers and kale and stuff like that are generally harder. So again, a slow build of that doesn't mean avoid it altogether. It means, maybe you like shave some broccoli in a dish or something. And so again, just a slow build of that tends to be more helpful.
Yeah, that's super helpful. I think for me, I was kind of that exact case. Is I thought adding fiber, me just eating broccoli would like, I'm like, I'm just gonna start there, and like you get bloated and you're gassy and you don't feel well. And I was like, okay, well, maybe I'll try like some fruit, like some berries. They're really high in fiber, and I realized I could digest that a lot better. And then so I'd work on that. And then over time, slowly adding maybe some of the quote unquote higher FODMAP fibers. My body tolerated them better as soon as I started to build a base of some fiber I could consume. I think the other thing that was really helpful for me was like actually hydrating as well, because you need water to move fiber. So it's if you don't drink a lot of water, you're dehydrated, that fiber can sit in the gut. Um, Last thing I had around like insoluble fiber, and this is my thoughts on it, and maybe I'm wrong, but helpful to just like help with the formation of stool, correct? So if someone has
Oh, bulking. Yeah.
loose stool, but having enough insoluble fiber helps kind of build that stool, if you will, so it's more of a solid piece to excrete.
Yes. Yeah, and that's our both are important. I mean, obviously building that fiber. So as I mentioned before, like fiber is food for those healthy bacteria and to like build up that protection of your gut. But there's different kinds. And so like you mentioned broccoli, like cruciferous vegetables. When I say like cruciferous, that's that broccoli, that cauliflower, that kale, like those are harder to digest and often more gas producing if your body is not as used to it. Um, and so yeah, but bulk is good, and but again, you have to see where your body is and what you need. So if we need more fiber, having a blend of both of those is good, and sometimes kind of figuring out what that looks like. Should I load up, two, in theory, like 2/3 of your fiber and some of the ones that are easier digested, and then slowly be building up that insoluble. But like we want both for different reasons, and so yeah, both good.
Yeah, thank you. That was super helpful. So, yeah, kind of, I guess I want to segue back to the beginning. It all interconnects, and it's very important to look at all aspects. I think, talking with Emily's earlier is like you want to take into account all of these different things. Your GI is going to play a role in your body's ability to excrete hormones and balance inflammation, and then an endocrine system to stress hormones to thyroid hormones. All of it's interconnected, and then you being able to do a deep dive as a patient, as a client, and understand those things and those hangups is going to help whatever you're working on get better resolution instead of only looking at singular pieces. I know it's expensive and it's time consuming to do testing, but if we have a lot of symptoms or we're trying to work through certain things like fertility, we really want to be open and be able to encompass the whole body. I think that for me, that's been most helpful to help clients resolve things long term. So I appreciate your insight on that, Ashley. We have about 6 minutes here. I say this every week. I want to pause and see if we can take any more questions before we wrap up. I'm going to give 30 to 60 seconds and see if we have anything else pop up in the chat. Off topic. Let me look for that, Andrea. I have not looked at your email. I will get in there and take a look at it, and I'll give you a response. Um, so yeah, I will do that. Does anybody else have any questions we can answer for you live right here? Going once, going twice. All right. I want to thank everybody for joining. I love doing this call. It's great to see new faces and similar faces. I hope everybody has a great rest of your week. And we will be here same to actually, no, I will not be here next week. I am going to be out of time. We will not have Hormone Happy Hour next Tuesday. I am competing in a bodybuilding show and I compete on Wednesday, so I will not be here. But thank you, everybody. I hope you all have a great week and take care.